Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we kick off a Back to Basics mini-series where we're going to help identify the good and bad habits for both buyers and sellers in the Pokemon Trading Card community. So a little bit of context as to why I'm creating this series. Obviously, tons of people always get in touch and they say, hey, what can I do to be a better seller? Or hey, what can I do to be a better buyer? And I figured, okay, make video series that will address these questions is probably going to be a beneficial set of content for anyone watching the channel. But then it occurred to me that I have my own experiences which also influence this, both as a buyer and a seller. So I know the things that I do that I've been praised for, and I also know the things that I do that I've been not praised for. And so I figured, let me combine that, let me run this by a few people, let me synthesize all that information, and let's go ahead and create one comprehensive series where we're going to highlight 3 habits or things that both good and bad buyers and sellers do. And the idea here is that it may not be as comprehensive a list, it may not be the most, detailed list, but as long as you adapt these 3 things in broad strokes, I think it's really going to help benefit you as both a buyer and a seller. Of course, if you do have additional tips and you want to leave those down below in the comments, please feel free to do so. In every video, I'm going to go ahead and try to pin one of the comments that has the best bit of feedback in it. And of course, feel free to engage with me as well as others down below in the comments. Now, the other major thing that I'm going to hold myself to is that when it comes to the good and the bad, I'm not going to just negate what I said in the previous video, if that makes sense. So today we're going to be doing what makes a good buyer. And so in the bad buyer video, don't expect to hear me just say the same things, but with the word not in front of them. Instead, I'm going to try to give you some genuine advice on things you can actively seek to not do, or things that you just shouldn't be doing in general, so that, again, you can become a better buyer, but also so that this content has real, true value. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get started with 3 things you can do to be a better buyer in the Pokemon Trading Card game community. So, when it comes to buying, the first thing that you should always do is have funds ready, or have a plan ready for how you will be paying for an item. So this is one of the probably simplest and most intuitive things that you can do, but you'd be surprised how many buyers commit to buying an item, specifically in places like eBay, but will then contact a seller and say, hey, can I have a week? I get paid next week. Or hey, I just had to buy something for my wife, so can I get back to you next week, bro? And it's really not fun when you're on eBay, you listed something, it's up for sale, and then magically some buyer chooses to buy it, plug you up, but now all of a sudden you can't even sell that product because according to eBay it's already been sold, and it's going to take a couple of days for you to get either your money or for you to cancel the sale and list again, because then the seller might have some issues with eBay on the back end saying, hey, why did you cancel on this buyer? So as a buyer, it's incredibly important for you to have your funds ready. Some general tips. If you're on eBay, bear in mind that you don't only have to pay with your bank account. You can use a credit card as well as a debit card, or you can even sign up for PayPal financing. Now again, the individual choice is up to you, but bear in mind that you do have a variety of options available to you. So even if you may not have money in the bank account that you currently have listed with eBay, you might then, of course, be able to use a credit card and then just pay the money when it comes in. Or if you're short money because your next paycheck is until next week, bear in mind that most credit cards work on a monthly cycle, meaning you could possibly pay with the credit card, which could benefit you as well because you can pay it off in full and get the points involved with that. But more importantly, it will help make the transaction very, very quick. There's a very simple reason why a lot of eBay feedback specifically notes quick payment, because quick payment facilitates quick shipment as well as a quicker overall business cycle and transaction. So bear in mind that you want to have your funds ready and that you really want to make sure that when you commit to buying something, you can pay as quickly as possible and just get the entire process started. Number 2 is to prepare to receive the item. Now, this is another one of those things that people might scratch their heads and say, wait, what? Why do I have to do that? Well, bear in mind, a buyer should be equally as professional, if not more professional, than the seller they are dealing with. I personally believe that in the hobby, there are tons of individuals who think that only the seller has to be professional and that the onus is really on them to impress you, to wine and dine you, and then to sell you the item. And then buyers can just act like pig people. But personally, I don't believe that's true. I think we both, as a buyer and a seller, need to meet, need to be professional, need to be chill. If we share the same hobby or we share the same interest, that's cool and great. But at a minimum, we both need to be professionals about what it is we're doing and really just kind of do business in the safest and the easiest way possible that's the most beneficial for all parties involved. And preparing to receive is one of the ways that you can do this. So think about this. You are a buyer, you buy something stupidly expensive, but you don't make sure anyone's home, or you don't leave the seller instructions that they can share with the delivery person. Now the delivery person gets there, leaves it on your front step because they think it's a jolly great neighborhood, and all of a sudden the package goes missing. And of course there wasn't insurance on it, and of course it's your fault, but it's not your fault because you're the buyer, you did nothing wrong. Au contraire. My argument is that you should prepare to receive the item. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can go about this. The first is by purchasing a P.O. box. P.O. boxes are great because every bit of mail that you get goes to the P.O. box. And as a result of that, you just don't have to worry about it. Everything goes there. You go to the P.O. box maybe one time a week, grab everything. And if your P.O. box is small, they usually leave a piece of paper in there for you that says, hey, you have a package behind the counter. So you go, you show ID, you show them the paper, they say, oh, great, here are all your packages. So that's one way to make sure that your packages arrive safely and that everything is sort of accounted for at the end of the day. Now, let's say you don't want a P.O. box. Hey, it's $12 a month. That might be a little out of my budget for one reason or the other. Fine, no problem. Instead, have it mailed to your home. But a couple of thoughts. 1, have it mailed to a relative's home who is always home. For example, someone who's a little older, retired, or works from home. This way, when the delivery person knocks on the door, they can receive the package on your behalf, and then you can just pick the package up from them whenever is convenient for you. In this way, you avoid all of the trouble of having the package left on a front porch or potentially stolen, and there's the additional benefit that you can just share with the seller, like, hey, don't ship it to this address, ship it to my aunt's house because she's always home and she'll be able to sign for the package for me. And just make sure that you turn signature confirmation on and make sure it's in her name as opposed to my own. Another way you can go about this is by requesting that the seller ship with an overnight service or ship with a 2-day service and just time it out so that delivery most likely takes place on the weekends. This way, if you work on the weekdays, you can at least be home on the weekends. Now, you get what I'm going here. There's tons of possibilities about how you can prepare to receive, but there are some general tips and tricks to it, and it's basically make sure your package can be delivered safely. As long as you do that, you're fine. The other big tip that I have regarding preparing to receive is that if you know the weather is going to be inclement, and I only say that because this week, the Northeast, where I'm located, got a pretty substantial weather event in terms of snow and rain and slush. The one thing I will say is that either request that the seller hold off on shipping until after that shipping event has happened, or again, be home so that your package doesn't get left out in the snow and that a vintage box of cards that's truly one of a kind doesn't get ruined by Mother Nature's handiwork. So by preparing to receive, you can really guarantee the safety of your own stuff that you've purchased, but you can also just, again, make the experience a lot easier for both the buyer as well as the seller. And finally but not least, number 3 on the list is going to be leaving constructive feedback. Now, a lot of people think that the only feedback that matters is the feedback from a buyer to a seller, because the idea here is that if I didn't have a pleasant experience, then, you know, I'm gonna ruin your eBay reputation. And that's why some eBay pages have 100% positive feedback, others don't have such great feedback. And again, it's generally thought that the more negative feedback you have, the worse a seller you are. When oftentimes I think buyers can equally contribute to and should equally be given feedback. So this is kind of a two-way street when it comes to feedback. Like, hey, you didn't have your funds ready to pay. Hey, you're just a dummy who is working 5 days a week and didn't tell me that when I shipped out the item. So my argument here is that as a buyer, you should definitely be seeking feedback from the seller, asking what you could have done better, asking how can I facilitate this transaction to make it as easy as possible for you to ship my item to me. And secondly, you should be giving feedback in return. So this is very much a cycle of feedback, which is going to help everyone get better. You're going to get buyer as a buyer, and then the seller is also going to develop better habits based on what you're telling them. Now, when it comes to leaving feedback to the seller, you need to be specific, you need to be kind, and you need to be constructive. Again, the idea here isn't, hey, you suck, you shipped my item with newspaper. Instead, you could say, hey, I noticed you were using newspaper, which is great, but bear in mind that if it gets wet, the ink can run and ruin cards. In the future, you might want to consider using plain old computer paper, or you might want to consider reusing some Amazon packaging that you get, or you might want to invest in some bubble wrap. Again, leaving feedback is a very delicate art, and many folks aren't really that great at it, I will admit. But if you can learn to leave constructive, positive feedback, as well as compliment people on what they did right, it can really help sellers become better over time. And bear in mind, the more good sellers we have in this community, the better off all of us are, because then there's less people to complain about, there's less cards getting destroyed, and there's more successful business happening. And more importantly, that's going to foster competition, which means as a buyer, you get better prices on everything you buy. So leaving feedback is not only a key part of the developmental phase for both the buyer and the seller, but it can also help affect the overall market as we hold each other accountable for the levels of professionalism and the competency that we all have within the hobby. But with that said, friends, those are 3 tips that I think every good buyer can use to be a better buyer within the Pokemon trading card community. Like I said, this is definitely not a comprehensive list, but I think these 3 areas are definitely some of the broadest and cover pretty much 90% of all transactions. Now, with that said, as I'd mentioned, if you thought of anything else or you have something to add, definitely feel free to leave that down below. I will definitely pin the best ones up there on the channel for everyone else to see. And of course, it's always fun to engage with you guys as well. Other than that, thanks again for checking out today's video. As I always say, I appreciate you stopping by, because you could have been anywhere on the internet or anywhere on YouTube and you chose to spend some time with me, which is always much appreciated. If you found today's content valuable, feel free to leave a like on the video, and as always, if you haven't already, join the Gengar Gang and hit that big old subscribe button. Other than that, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. I hope you're having an amazing Saturday. Stay safe out there if you're in the Northeast. Other than that, friends, thanks again for checking out a video. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.